I was on internet browsing my stuff when I saw an advert about Illuminate Society. I opened that page. This society is a process of selling your soul to the devil, such that everything that you do would be under the influence of the devil, not God. They offer man and your dream life. There is a form on that page. I filled the form and sent it on email. I started communicating with the society through emails. They then asked me to send them 500 United States dollars to buy beginning materials. After sending the money, they then sent me a confirmation letter, said they would get back to me about what I was going to do next. The following week, I received another email confirming that the beginning items were brought and they promised to visit me soon. That day, I replied to the email. I received a call from someone who was here in Zimbabwe, but in Harare. The person was an agent of the society here in Zimbabwe. He said that we were going to meet here in Gweru on the following Sunday at 9. On that Sunday morning, my mom asked me to prepare for church. We started having arguments because I knew I had my plans. She gave up and left me to do as I wanted. When my mom went out for church, I went out for the beginning process. I arrived at the meeting point by 8:30 and waited. Seated at the chairs in the reception, 5 men entered wearing black suits and red ties, but I didn't realize then that they were the people I was waiting for. After about 10 minutes, a lady said I was needed in room 35 in the second floor. When I got to the staircase, my sixth sense sensed the danger. I felt weak, turned back, and went to church where I had earlier refused to go. I quit at the last process, but I didn't know this would be affecting me in long term. I am a man aged 25 serving a jail sentence for killing my own mom. I heard about the program by my new inmates. Wrote this letter seeking for advice from you and your followers. I was in college on attachment. On the day the incident happened, I went to the shops at around 3 p.m. My purpose at the shops was to go and play snooker. There was no electricity at home, so I wanted to find something entertaining. I went there leaving my mom at home. I wanted to kill time waiting for electricity to return. Went to the shops. The power got back while I was at the shops. By then, I had brought 2 pints of Black Label. I went back home to prepare for the plans I had. When I got home, I greeted my mother. I reminded her of my plans to go out. She said it was fine. After I dressed up, I told her I was leaving, at which point she wanted to send me to the shops to buy her some beer. She insisted that I go and buy a beer before leaving because I was known to go for up to a week without coming back. In some instances, I used to be with the boys, and in some instances, I will be with my girlfriends. I initially refused to go to buy the beer. I had suggested to drive her to the shops, then she would come back on foot. We had a little argument. Because she was insisting that I should go, I eventually gave up and did what she had insisted. I went and brought the beer and opened one for her. I went to my room and took my bag, which had a few items of clothing since I was heading to a Blawayo. Was supposed to go there with my friends because there were drag races happening there. All I last remember is we met at the door as I was leaving. I still can't quite understand how I grabbed the knife and stabbed her 5 times on her left breast. Only remembering waking up by her side holding a knife. My knees and hands were stained with blood, but she was now dead. Having realized what I have done, I panicked. I could not even inform anyone of what I had done. Washed the knife and placed it in top of a pelmet. I locked all the doors and left with the car, then locked the gate. Neighbors were confused by how I sped off. They did not know what I have just done. After I left home, my first stop was when I was picking my girlfriend. I drove her to town. just so she can carry out her errands. There afterwards, I decided to go back home because I didn't have enough money, but I knew that my mother was supposed to receive money from her friends on this exact day. They had a savings club. I went back home, parked the car, got inside and changed my clothes. I then saw my mother's friend's maid. I decided to drive to her so that I could block her from seeing what had happened. I don't want people to know what had happened. Told her that my mother had sent me to collect her money on her behalf. I lied to her that my mom had gone to church because they were aware of the function that was happening at church. I tried to convince her that I had been sent by my mother. She initially refused to give me the money, and I told her that I was gonna tell my mother that she had refused with the money. Fearing that my mother would call her boss to ask why she had refused with the money, she called me to come back and gave me $150. I got into town and I was communicating with my friend. We met up and talked. We agreed to go club and leave at midnight. I didn't know that my girlfriend had plans to go to Harare the following morning. She only revealed her plans to us when we were in the club. We decided to cancel our plans just so we could accompany her to Harare. All this while I was driving without a license. We got to the bar, which was an apartment. There was a driveway wide enough for 2 cars. I swiped the other car, probably because I was drunk and I didn't stop, made a U-turn and left. The owner of the car that I had swiped was a son to one of my mother's friends. He let me go because he planned to have his mother tell mine. I drove off with my girlfriend because my friend had his car. We went to my girlfriend's place. My friend called me, telling me how I sped off. He told me that I was on the run and told me to wait for him so that he could tell me about the situation. He told me to meet at Neo Shotenov. I drove from my girlfriend's place and left her behind. I was now alone in the car. I arrived at Neo Shoten. My friend had brought other guys named Gabu and Munash. These 2 guys were also my friends. We were in the same college. They let me know that I had broken the window of the other car. They told me that they've negotiated with the owner of the car. My friends were not even suspicious because I'm very good at masking my distress. It's hard to figure out if I'm distressed or not. But people in the neighborhood were seeing me driving around in my mother's car. It rose a lot of questions since it was unusual. But they didn't know anything at that time. The owner of the car I swiped went and reported the issue to his mother. They drove to my house. They knocked at the gate and hooted to no response, but all the lights were on. My mother, being a sociable person, people were wondering where she were. She wasn't even reachable on her phone. In fact, I had taken her phone. I ended up switching it off because people were keeping on calling. Also, I didn't want my girlfriend to be suspicious. So when that guy and his mother got no response from my mother, they decided to call a best friend. She told them that it was highly unlikely that she would go to church without telling her, since they would always go to church together. They also called my older brother's friend, asking him where my mother was. He also told them that he had last spoken to my mother in the afternoon. He told them that he didn't know anything about her whereabouts. They told him of how I suspiciously driving around in my mother's car. My brother's friend got troubled. He resolved to go and check the next morning. The guilt later started on me, and I decided to go and end myself into the church because I knew that there were people at the church. I parked inside the church yard. Some women witnessed my arrival at the church, but they were confused by the fact that I was driving a car without her absence. I got out of the car and headed to the dean's office, but I made a U-turn at the door of the office. I cowardly returned at the door and went back into the car. At around 3, my friend suggested that we go to my house to sleep. I lied to him that it was impossible since there were visitors coming, so he figured that going to my house was not a good idea. We slept in a car. I called my girlfriend at around 6. I told her that we were coming to pick her. We drove and fetched her. Because I was acting a little differently than usual, she was now becoming suspicious. But she didn't have the guts to ask me. We got in town and filled the car and got on our way. We traveled to Harare, where I was caught. In the neighborhood, people were being troubled on what was happening. They ended up breaking the gate and my mom's bedroom's window and discovered that there was none inside. Informed my siblings that mom was missing. The next day, they broke the window in the cabin of the police. That's when the body was discovered, partially decaying. To cut it short, I was caught in Harare. Mom was buried while I was now at the hands of the police. In court, at the sentence, there were arguments. There was an argument between the judge, the assessors, and the prosecutor that I was supposed to be sentenced to life in prison. But the lawyer argued that I was still a kid. They then agreed to compromise, and I ended up getting a sentence of 20 years in prison. Now I am in prison. My older brother is visiting me. The other 2 siblings didn't want to have anything to do with me. They are not able to forgive me now. I tried by all means, but I want them to forgive me. What can I do?